Welcome back, Warrior. We are going to be reading Doctrine and Covenants, section 37, and this one has 4 verses, so I figure we could read this one because it was right after section 36. Okay, so a little bit of background says It was now December 1830, 8 months after the church had been restored. The church had grown much larger because of the 4 missionaries, Oliver Cowdery, Peter Whitmer Jr., Ziba Peterson, and Parley P. Pratt, who had passed through the Ohio and baptized over 100 people. At the time of this revelation, those 4 missionaries were now on their way to Independence, Missouri, to teach the Native Americans who were living nearby. The winter of 1830 was particularly treacherous and known as the Winter of the Deep Snow. Oh man, that would be so hard for me. I do not do well in the winter. I think my arthritis doesn't love it so much. But I've had like arthritis since I was like a teenager. So anyway, the journey to Independence took them 1.5 months as they journeyed 300 miles through the bitter snow. No gracias. Parley P. Pratt wrote that the bread they had was so frozen that we could not bite or penetrate any part of it, but the outside crust. That's so sad. They finally arrived in Independence on January 13th, 1831. Holy smokes. Meanwhile, Joseph and Sidney, these men were so dedicated to the cause of the Lord. It is so inspiring that they sacrificed all that, and sometimes we can't even wake up to go to church on time. You know what I mean? And it's literally 4 minutes away. Like, we are so blessed to live when we do, Meanwhile, Joseph and Sidney were in New York working on the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible. Persecution was growing, and their enemies were secretly meeting to plan their destruction and seek their lives. Here in section 37, the Lord instructed them to stop the translation and gather the saints to Ohio. The Lord was protecting the saints, but they will have their faith tested as they will each decide whether they will leave their homes, farms, businesses, families, society, and friends and move over 250 miles westward, further than most of them would have ever traveled before. Through the snow. I don't think I would have went. Isn't that sad? Like, I would love to think that I would have went, but I already said right now, I was like, no thanks. And I didn't even realize that was coming. Because sometimes we think it's just the prophet and apostles that are called to do hard things for the Lord. Right? We just think like, well, it's because they're prophets or it's because they're apostles. They have to do the hard things, And then when everyone's asked, you're like, wait, what? I thought y'alls were just supposed to do that. I just want to stay home. Okay. Whew. I'm going to need some tissues. So like Lehi, who acted in faith to lead his family out of Jerusalem, these saints will have to leave behind things they had worked hard for and loved dearly. Imagine the Whitmer farm and every tree they had chopped down and rock they had removed to create good land for their crops. Imagine, I hate farming too. Like, you go through all that work. Imagine the businesses and farms that Joseph Knight Sr. will need to leave behind. Imagine the Smiths leaving behind the sacred grove and never again seeing the hill Cumorah. Imagine Emma saying goodbye to her family, never to see them again. Every saint will need to act in faith, but ahead of them was Kirtland, where Joseph will receive the most recorded revelations. There they will have the school of the prophets, where they will organize the Quorum of the 12, and where they will build the first temple to which the Savior himself will come. Yeah, but you don't know those things, right, in advance to go, right? You don't have that. Like, hindsight's always 20/20. So these saints, are like the man in the story told by Elder Neil L. Anderson in April 2007 General Conference. Okay, here's what I'm going to read. One second. I need a tissue. Okay, so it says, he says, this is Elder Neil L. Anderson. I take as my subject today something President Hinckley said in General Conference in April 1973. I had just returned home from my mission. So much seemed ahead of me. Would I be able to consistently make the right choices throughout my life? Then Elder Gordon B. Hinckley spoke of meeting a young naval officer from Asia. The officer had not been a Christian, but during training in the United States, he had learned about the church and was baptized. He was now preparing to return to his native land. President Hinckley asked the officer, "Your people are not Christians. What will happen when you return home a Christian, and more particularly a Mormon Christian?" The officer's face clouded and he replied, "My family will be disappointed. As for my future and my career, all opportunity may be foreclosed against me." President Hinckley asked, "Are you willing to pay so great a price for the gospel?" With his dark eyes moistened by tears. He answered with a question. "It's true, isn't it?" President Hinckley responded, "Yes, it is true." To which the officer replied, "Then what else matters?" Through the year, I remember that when he told that story. Through the years, I have reflected on these words. It's true, isn't it? Then what else matters? These questions have helped me put difficult issues in proper perspective. End quote. Okay, so this is his Elder Neil L. Anderson's talk titled, "It's True, Isn't It? Then What Else Matters?" April 2007 General Conference. I love it. I love it so much. Okay. And we have this preface here for the section 37. It says, "Revelation given to Joseph Smith the prophet and Sidney Rigdon near Fayette, New York. December 1830. Herein is given the first commandment concerning the gathering in this dispensation." Okay. So, behold, verse 1. "Behold, I say unto you," look, I already cleaned up my face, and now it's starting again. "Behold, I say unto you, that it is not expedient in me that ye should translate any more until you shall go to the Ohio. And this because of the enemy and for your sakes." Because Satan is the worst. And sometimes we need to pause the righteous things that we're doing so that we can get in a safe place, because Satan is the worst. And he will continue to attack us, right? Sometimes we do need to take a break from those things that are righteous goals, and so that we can do things that will help us feel safe and be safe. And so I love that. Verse 2, "And again I say unto you that ye shall not go until ye have preached my gospel in those parts, and have strengthened up the church whithersoever it is found, and more especially in Colesville. For behold, they pray unto me in much faith. And again a commandment I give unto the church, that it is expedient in me that they should assemble together at the Ohio against the time that my servant Oliver Cowdery shall return unto them. Behold, here is wisdom, and let every man choose for himself until I come, even so, amen." Okay, so during this time of translation, there was much persecution of the prophet and others involved in the work. Here in verse 1, the Lord instructed Joseph and Sidney to stop the translation until they go to the Ohio. And the Lord tells them, "Because of the enemy and for your sakes." The Lord knew that the persecutors were not just planning on having Joseph arrested and disturbing their baptisms. They were plotting their destruction, their deaths, right? But this command to... Okay, I don't know what was happening. I had to restart. Okay, so here's the quote from Robert J. Matthews. It says, "The King James Version has very little to say about Enoch, but near the middle of December, with the appointment of Sidney Rigdon as scribe for the translation of Doctrine and Covenants, section 35:20, an extensive revelation was received, restoring a vast amount of information relative to Enoch. If placed chronologically, the portion of the Joseph Smith translation that deals with Enoch would occur just after Doctrine and Covenants, section 35 was received, and before section 37. This revelation speaks of a city called Zion, in which the inhabitants were of one heart and one mind and dwelt in righteousness, and there were no poor among them. Shortly after giving this information about Enoch's Zion, the Lord instructed the brethren to cease translating the Bible for a time and to move the church from New York to Ohio, where they would receive the law of the Lord and a special blessing. It is most interesting that most of the next 20 or so sections in the Doctrine and Covenants discuss many aspects of the law that would establish Zion, such as consecration of property, the establishment of the economic order for the church, the Sabbath, and the building of a temple. It appears that one of the objects that the Lord may have had in mind in having Joseph Smith translate this part of the Bible was to provide the saints with a record of Enoch's Zion as a pattern for the building of the Latter-day Saint Zion, Zion. Since it was missing from the Bible, it had to be restored. End quote. Robert J. Matthews, from article titled Plain and Precious Things Restored, Ensign, July 1982. So before Joseph and Oliver were to leave, they were to go to the various branches and strengthen up the church. These were all brand new members who were going to be asked to do something very hard. They needed to be strengthened at this time. Okay, that's what they were doing. I was like, why does it say that? It was not just Joseph and Sidney who were to go to the Ohio, but the church should assemble together at the Ohio as well. They were all to move to Ohio. When they were to go, they are to go at the time that my servant Oliver Cowdery shall return unto them. At the time of this revelation, Oliver was on his way to Missouri to teach the Native Americans who lived along the western border of Missouri. Now that the Lord had told them where to go, they should go, and when they should leave, he declared, "Let every man choose for himself until I come." The Lord was directing them, and he knew what promises awaited them, but it was up to each of them whether or not they would choose to go. Sister Wendy Watson Nelson spoke of the importance President Nelson puts on allowing individuals to use their agency. An article in the church newsroom reported, quote, "He is only reporting to the Lord, and he is fearless with that focus, that and his passion for preserving the agency of others. This is not a man who will say, 'You must.' In fact, he said to me the other day, 'I don't even want to use the word must in any of my talks. I don't like that word.' That is Russell Marion Nelson. He will never force the human mind." End quote. Ooh, that's so good. I love that. She shared that about him. So Sister Wendy Watson Nelson, Church Newsroom, October 30th, 2018. And that's because he's trying so hard to be like the Lord, not remove our agency, but to allow us to see the freedom of our agency in order to choose to be with God. You know, they say, like, God doesn't want us to choose good. He wants us to want to choose good, or he wants us to want to choose to be with him, right? So it's not just choosing to be with him. He doesn't want to make us be with him. It's like, I don't know. I was going to give an analogy, but I think I already shared that one. Anyway, so that is it. And then we have the Read It, Live It for this chapter, and it is right here. And it says, "In the congregations that prayed to the Lord in much faith, the Lord strengthened up the church." Are you looking for strength? Pray in faith. Ooh, I love that. Okay, and we know that the Doctrine and Covenants isn't just for Alexa. Stop. We know that the Doctrine and Covenants isn't just for the people at that time. We know that it is a revelation, that they are revelations for us. Right? And so I think it's so important for us to be reading these things to understand how they apply in our lives as well. So that's why I love the Read It, Live It, because they kind of help us apply those things in our lives. And this is from the Don't Miss This. Do you guys remember the Don't Miss This podcast? So anyways, all right. And that is it. So until section 38, stay strong, warrior.
Stay strong, warrior.